The moon was a blade of silver hanging in the velvet dark, its light spilling through the tall arched window of our bedchamber. It bleached the color from the heavy tapestries and laid a ghostly sheen across the cold stone floor. A silence pressed in on the room, a silence that was not peaceful, but waiting. From my side of the vast, cold bed, I watched my husband. I told myself this was my duty. This silent vigil, but a knot of unease had been tightening in my stomach since dusk. Something was wrong. The air itself felt thin, charged with a strange, wild energy that prickled my skin and made the fine hairs on my arms stand on end. He was a stranger in his own skin tonight, and I was about to find out why. I am Gwenora Lysar, or rather Gwenora Melrick now, a name that felt as foreign on my tongue as the crown felt on my head. For 3 months, I had been the wife of Prince Idran, a political pawn moved across the board to secure the northern territories for my father's kingdom. The poets wrote odes to our union, calling it a joining of mountain strength and valley grace. In truth, it was a transaction of land and blood, and I was the currency. Idran was precisely what a prince of the cold northern kingdom of Vorlog should be. He was carved from ice and duty, his features so perfectly chiseled they seemed to lack the warmth of living flesh. His hair was the color of winter wheat, and his eyes a startling clear gray, like a storm-swept sea. He was handsome, I could not deny it. But his beauty was that of a marble statue, perfect, admirable, and utterly untouchable. Our days were a careful choreography of courtly functions. He was flawlessly polite, his hand a cool, firm presence at the small of my back as he guided me through throngs of whispering courtiers. He ensured my plate was filled at banquets, that my chambers were warm, that I had books and music to pass the lonely hours. His gestures were kind, but they were the empty kindnesses of a man fulfilling an obligation. He never truly looked at me. His eyes would pass over my face, acknowledging my presence, but never truly seeing the woman trapped behind the princess's facade. And the nights were the coldest of all. We lay side by side in the cavernous bed, the space between us a frozen chasm. He performed his husbandly duty with the same remote efficiency he applied to signing treaties, his touch gentle but devoid of passion. He would murmur the correct pleasantries, kiss my brow with cool lips, and then roll away, his breathing evening out into the steady rhythm of sleep while I lay awake, staring into the oppressive darkness, the scent of him, clean linen and cold steel, a constant reminder of the cage I now called home. I had told myself I could endure it. I was a daughter of nobility. I knew the price of peace. I had braced myself for a life of quiet loneliness, of polite smiles and a heart kept carefully locked away. But I had not braced myself for this. Tonight, the cool composure was gone, shattered into 1,000 pieces. He had returned to our chambers an hour past sunset, his face pale and slick with a fine sheen of sweat despite the evening chill. He had dismissed my ladies-in-waiting with a curt wave of his hand, his voice strained. When he turned to me, his gray eyes were dark, dilated, holding a flicker of something I had never seen in them before. Fear, raw, animal fear. "Lock the door, Gwenora," he had rasped, his voice a low command that brooked no argument. My fingers trembled as I turned the heavy iron key. The solid thunk of the bolt sliding into place echoed in the unnerving silence. When I turned back, he was standing by the window, staring out at the rising moon as if it were an executioner. The silver light carved his silhouette from the shadows, making him seem both ethereal and menacing. "Idran, what is it? Are we in danger?" I asked, my own voice a small, wavering thing. He didn't answer. He just stood there, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, his knuckles white. A tremor ran through his powerful frame, a violent, uncontrollable shudder that seemed to rack him from the inside out. He pressed a hand to the cold stone of the window frame, his head bowed, his breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. "Stay back," he ground out, the words distorted, as if his tongue had grown too thick for his mouth. "Whatever you see, stay away from me." A cold dread, sharp and piercing, lanced through me. I took an involuntary step back. my silk nightgown whispering against the floor. The charged atmosphere in the room was suffocating now, thick with the scent of ozone, like a storm about to break not in the sky, but within the very walls of our chamber. The moonlight seemed to grow brighter, more intense, pouring over him like liquid silver. And then it began. A sound tore from his throat, a sound that was not human. It was a strangled cry of agony that twisted and warped into a guttural snarl. He fell to his knees, his body convulsing. I watched in frozen horror as his spine bowed into an impossible arch, the fabric of his fine tunic straining and then ripping with a series of sharp, violent tears. The sound that followed will haunt my nightmares for the rest of my days. The wet, sickening crack of bone, loud and obscene in the silent room. His bones were breaking, rearranging themselves under his skin. I wanted to scream, to run, to slam my hands over my eyes and block out the grotesque spectacle. But I was paralyzed, a statue of terror, my feet rooted to the floor. My mind reeled, refusing to process the impossible truth unfolding before me. This was a fever dream, a madness sent to punish me for my loveless heart. It could not be real, but the scent of blood, sharp and coppery, was undeniably real. It mingled with the growing feral musk that was radiating from him. His fingers, which had so formally held my own, were elongating, the nails thickening and darkening, curving into wicked black claws that gouged deep furrows into the stone floor. Dark, coarse fur, the color of midnight and ash, sprouted from his skin, covering his arms, his chest, his contorting face. His handsome, princely features were being erased, twisted into something monstrous. His jaw cracked, extending forward into a muzzle, his lips peeling back to reveal teeth that were no longer human, but the long, yellowed fangs of a predator. His scream became a howl, a long, mournful cry of pure primal agony that rattled the very glass in the window panes, and through it all his eyes changed last. The cool, stormy gray bled away, consumed by a terrifying, incandescent gold. They burned with a feral light, the pupils slit and inhuman. They were the eyes of a beast, a creature of nightmare and legend. The transformation took an eternity and a heartbeat. When it was over, the Prince of Orlog was gone. In his place stood a monster. It was a wolf, but a wolf larger than any I had ever seen in the royal forests. It was a titan of fang and fur, its shoulders as broad as a draft horse, its body a corded mass of deadly muscle under a thick, dark pelt. It stood on 4 powerful legs, its head lowered, steam puffing from its nostrils in the cool air. The heat rolling off its body was immense, a furnace of predatory power. The gilded cage had just become a hunter's den, and I was trapped inside with the hunter. My breath hitched in my throat. A tiny, pathetic sound. The creature's head snapped up. Its ears, sharp and alert, swiveled in my direction. The molten gold eyes locked onto mine. There was no recognition in them, no hint of the man who had been there moments before. There was only a cold, calculating intelligence, a predator's focus. It took a slow, deliberate step towards me, its claws clicking softly on the stone. The movement was fluid, silent, a ripple of lethal grace. I stumbled backward, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a scream. My back hit the cold, carved wood of the bedpost, and I could go no further. I was cornered. My mind raced, scrambling for an explanation, a curse. It had to be a curse. The whispers I'd heard at court, the ones I had dismissed as foolish peasant superstition, tales of the first Melric king, who was said to have made a pact with the old gods of the forest, who could take the shape of a great wolf. The stories were told to frighten children, not to be believed by a well-educated princess. But the proof was here, breathing and bloody and stalking towards me. My marriage was not a political alliance. It was a lie. A monstrous, terrifying lie. I hadn't been married to a prince. I had been given a sacrifice to a beast. The wolf took another step, and another. It was close enough now that I could smell the wildness of it. The scent of pine needles, damp earth, and fresh blood. It was a scent so primal, so overwhelming, it bypassed my terror and spoke to something ancient and sleeping deep within me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure fear, but my limbs refused to obey my command to flee. It stopped just out of reach, its massive head on a level with my waist. It lowered its muzzle, its hot breath ghosting over my trembling, outstretched hand. I could feel the rumble in its chest, a low, continuous growl that vibrated through the floorboards and up into my very bones. It wasn't a growl of aggression, I realized with a jolt of shock. It was something else, deeper, more complex. It was possessive. Slowly, deliberately, it inhaled, taking in my scent. Its golden eyes closed for a fraction of a second, as if savoring it. The scent of my fear, my sweat, my blood pounding through my veins. When its eyes opened again, they were fixed on me with an unnerving intensity, and a flicker of something ancient and knowing passed through them. It was as if the beast saw not just the terrified woman before it, but the very essence of my soul. The rational part of my brain screamed that I should be dead already. It should have torn my throat out the moment the change was complete, but it hadn't. It was watching me, studying me, its terrible intelligence a far greater threat than simple, mindless savagery. This was not just a beast. It was him, Edrin, locked somewhere inside that monstrous form. Then its jaws parted slightly, and a sound escaped. A guttural, half-formed word that was more vibration than voice. A sound that tried to shape my name. Gwen? The sound, a rasp of crushed rock and animal need, shattered the last of my composure. It was his voice, twisted and broken by the wolf's throat. But it was him. A choked sob broke from my lips. My prince, my cold and distant husband, was a monster. And in the depths of his burning golden eyes, I saw not the desire to kill me, but something far more terrifying. I saw the desire to claim me. The world narrowed to the space between my hammering heart and his golden eyes. My name, mangled by a throat not made for human speech, hung in the air between us, a bridge of sound across a chasm of terror. The beast, Idran, took a half-step closer, and the primal instinct to flee, to scream until my lungs tore, warred with a paralyzing, morbid curiosity. The man I married was inside that monstrous form, looking out at me through the eyes of a wolf. He lowered his massive head again, the growl in his chest softening to a low, guttural hum. It was a sound of profound, aching loneliness, and it struck a chord of unwilling sympathy deep within me. He nudged my hand, which was still pressed against the bedpost, with the side of his wet nose. The touch was shockingly gentle, a ghost of a caress from a creature built for tearing flesh. His fur was coarse against my skin, smelling of storm-cracked pine and the metallic tang of his own blood. For a timeless moment we stayed like that, the terrified princess and the beast prince. The silver light of the moon seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a suddenness that made me gasp, he pulled back. He looked at me one last time, a long, searching gaze that felt as if it were memorizing every detail of my face, and then he turned. In a single fluid bound of impossible power, he launched himself toward the open window. His massive form blotted out the moon for a second before he disappeared over the stone ledge and into the night, leaving only the cold air and the deep gouged furrows in the floor as proof he had ever been there at all. I didn't move. I couldn't. My legs were water, my lungs frozen. The silence that rushed back into the room was a deafening roar. I remained pressed against the bedpost, my knuckles white, staring at the empty window, my mind a blank slate of shock. The echoes of cracking bone and that agonized howl replayed themselves in my head, a litany of horror. Sleep was a country I could not find. I spent the rest of the night huddled in a chair, a heavy blanket pulled up to my chin, my eyes fixed on the door I had locked hours before. Every creak of the castle settling, every distant call of a nightbird sent a fresh wave of adrenaline through me. I was a prisoner awaiting the return of her jailer. What would he be when he came back? Man or monster? And which was worse? The cold, distant prince who had lied to me? Or the beast that had looked at me with such raw, possessive hunger? Dawn broke gray and reluctant, seeping into the room like a wash of dirty water. It revealed the full extent of the chaos. His torn tunic lay in shreds on the floor, stained with dark patches of blood. The deep scratches in the stone seemed to scream in the morning light. The air was thick with the lingering feral scent of him, an olfactory ghost that refused to dissipate. A soft knock came at the door. I flinched so violently the chair scraped against the floor. "Your Highness," a woman's voice called, calm and steady. "It is Ilara. May I enter?" Ilara, the head of the royal household. A severe, gray-haired woman whose face was a permanent mask of disapproving efficiency. I had barely exchanged more than a few words with her in 3 months. My voice was a dry croak. "One moment." My hands shook as I crossed the room and turned the heavy key. The bolt slid back with a groan. I opened the door a crack and peered out. Ilara stood there, her hands clasped before her, her expression as placid as ever. Her gaze flickered past me, into the room, taking in the scene of devastation. Not a single muscle in her face moved. There was no shock, no alarm. There was only a quiet, weary resignation, as if she were looking at a wine stain on a valuable rug. "The prince has taken a ride," she said, her voice low and even. "He often does after a restless night. I will have the chamber set to rights." She pushed the door open gently and swept past me, followed by 2 young maids who kept their eyes fixed firmly on the floor. I watched, dumbfounded, as the 3 of them moved with quiet, practiced purpose. Ilara knelt, her old bones creaking softly, and ran a finger along one of the deep gouges in the stone. She sighed, a small, frustrated sound, as if this were a recurring and tedious chore. "Granite dust mixed with resin. It will be invisible by noon," she murmured to herself. One of the maids gathered the bloody shreds of the prince's tunic, handling them as if they were common laundry. The other opened the windows wide, letting the sharp morning air rush in to sweep away the scent of wolf and blood. They knew. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. This was not a secret horror known only to me. It was a managed, contained, and routine event. A restless night. My life, my marriage, my terror. It was all just part of a monstrous protocol. "You knew," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "All of you." Ilara rose and turned to face me. For the first time, her iron composure seemed to soften, and a flicker of something, pity perhaps, crossed her face. "Some things, Your Highness, are the burdens of the Melrick line, and of those who serve them. He is I couldn't say the word. Werewolf? Lycanthrope. The terms felt like they belonged in a peasant's fable, not in the gilded halls of a royal palace. "He is our prince," Ilara corrected gently but firmly. "And your husband. He is the blood of the first king, the blood of the great wolf. It is not a curse. It is his birthright, and his burden." The world tilted on its axis. My marriage was not a lie to hide a curse. It was a ritual to honor a birthright. I was not the wife of a man who turned into a beast. I was the wife of a beast who sometimes wore the skin of a man. The maids finished their work and left as silently as they had come, leaving Ilara and me alone. "A bath has been drawn for you, Highness," she said, her voice returning to its usual brisk tone. "The council will be expecting you." "The council?" My head spun. Why would they want to see me? "They will wish to welcome you properly." The way she said the word properly sent a chill down my spine. It was clear my true initiation into this kingdom had not been my wedding day, but last night. I allowed her to lead me to the bathing chamber, my limbs moving with the numb obedience of a doll. As I sank into the steaming, herb-scented water, the heat did nothing to chase away the profound cold that had settled deep in my bones. I was adrift in a sea of secrets, and I had no idea how to swim. He was waiting for me when I returned to the bedchamber. Idran stood by the fire, which now crackled merrily in the hearth, as if to mock the horror of the night. He was dressed in a simple black tunic and breeches, his winter wheat hair damp and disheveled. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes, and a deep, angry-looking scratch ran from his temple down his jawline, a scratch that hadn't been there yesterday. He had his back to me, but I knew the moment he sensed my presence. His shoulders stiffened, every line of his body tightening with tension. He turned slowly. His face was a pale, strained mask, but it was his eyes that held me captive. The cool, stormy gray was gone. In its place was a turbulent mixture of gray and gold, flecks of the beast's fire still swirling in the depths of his human gaze. It was as if the wolf had not fully retreated, but was lurking just behind the surface, watching me. "Gwenora," he said. His voice was raw, hoarse. I stopped in the middle of the room, clutching the silk of my dressing gown. All the fear and fury and betrayal of the last 12 hours rose in my throat like bile. "You lied to me," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I didn't know I possessed. "My father, the court, this entire kingdom, it was all a lie." "It was a necessity," he answered, his voice flat. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. "A necessity?" I took a step forward, emboldened by my anger. "To marry a woman under false pretenses? To lock her in a room while you change? You could have killed me." "But I didn't." The words were quiet, yet they resonated with an absolute certainty that chilled me to the core. He took a step towards me, and I flinched back. A flicker of pain, deep and genuine, crossed his face before he masked it. "The wolf. It would not harm you. It cannot." "How can you possibly know that?" I spat. "Because you are my mate," he said, the words falling like stones into the silence. "The bond was forged when we took our vows. It recognizes you. It will protect you above all else, even from myself. Mate." The word was so primal, so animal. It stripped away all pretense of our courtly marriage, laying bare the raw, possessive truth I had seen in those golden eyes. I was not his wife. I was his mate, his property. "I am a princess of Lisar," I said, drawing myself up, a pathetic attempt to reclaim some semblance of my old identity. Not some animal to be claimed. "You are both," he said, his gaze intense. "And that is something you must learn to accept. Your world is no longer just one of gowns and politics. It is now one of fang and claw as well. Our world." He closed the distance between us then, moving with the same silent grace the wolf had possessed. He stopped directly in front of me, so close I could feel the heat radiating from his body and see the flecks of gold swirling in his irises. The scent of pine and wildness still clung to him, a faint but undeniable reminder of the beast within. He reached out, his hand hovering in the air for a moment before he gently touched the scratch on his own jaw. This happened when I landed. I was careless, rushing to put distance between us, to give you space. He looked down at my hands, which were clenched into fists at my sides. "I never intended for you to see it the way you did. The first change after a mating, it is unpredictable, volatile. I should have been chained." His confession, the hint of vulnerability, did more to disarm me than any threat. He was not a monster reveling in his power. He was a king burdened by it. I saw in that moment the crushing weight of the crown he was born to wear, a crown not of gold, but of bone. "Why me, Idrin?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why was I chosen?" "Our bloodlines are compatible, ancient. Your lineage has a strength the council believed would be able to withstand the bonding." He paused and his eyes searched my face. "And when I first saw you, the wolf, it was quiet for the first time in years. It knew you." Before I could process the implications of his words, the heavy oak door swung open. Alara stood there, her face impassive. Behind her stood 2 guards, their faces grim, their hands resting on the pommels of their swords. They were dressed in black leather armor, embossed with the snarling wolf's head of the Malric crest. "My prince," Alara said, her voice cutting through the tension. "The council is assembled. They are waiting to see the princess." Idrin's jaw tightened. He straightened up, the moment of vulnerability gone, replaced by the cold mask of the prince. He looked from Alara to me, and the message was clear. The private horror was over. The public reckoning was about to begin. "Come," he said, his voice once again the familiar, remote command of a royal. He held out his hand. "It is time you met my pack." Idren's hand was a cool, firm weight in the small of my back, guiding me from our chambers. The gesture was the same one he had used 100 times in the royal court, a practiced motion of polite possession. But today, it felt entirely different. It was no longer the touch of a prince. It was the touch of a keeper, an owner. A current of energy, subtle but undeniable, seemed to flow from his palm into my spine, a low hum of possessive power that was both terrifying and strangely steadying. The corridors we walked were not the grand, tapestry-lined halls of the public royal wing. He led me down a winding staircase I had never seen, into the older, deeper parts of the castle. Here, the walls were rough-hewn stone, sweating with a damp chill. The air grew heavier, thick with the smells of earth, wood smoke, and something else, a musky animal scent that spoke of a power that had seeped into the very foundations of this place over centuries. The 2 guards followed us, their footsteps unnervingly silent on the stone flags. They were not walking, they were padding, moving with the predatory grace of wolves on the hunt. I tried to keep my breathing even, to hold my head high as a princess should, but my heart was a wild bird beating against the cage of my ribs. Every shadow seemed to hold a pair of golden eyes. Every draft of air carried whispers of the beast. My world had been turned inside out. The polite smiles of the court were a fragile veneer over a kingdom of tooth and claw, and I had been sleeping in the Alpha's den, completely unaware. Idren stopped before a massive set of iron-strapped oak doors. There were no crests or gilding here, only a single deeply carved image, a great wolf, its head thrown back in a silent howl to a full moon. One of the guards stepped forward and pushed the door open. It swung inward with a low groan, revealing the chamber beyond. It was not a council room, it was a lair. The circular chamber was carved from the living rock of the mountain the castle was built upon. A great roaring fire pit dominated the center of the room, its flames leaping high and casting dancing, monstrous shadows on the stone walls. Furs, bear, stag, and wolf were thrown over rough-hewn wooden chairs and benches arranged in a semicircle around the fire. The air was thick with the scent of pine and power, a heady, intoxicating mix that made my head swim. And they were waiting. 5 figures sat in the high-backed chairs. They did not rise as we entered. They simply watched, their eyes gleaming in the firelight. For a terrifying moment, I wasn't sure if they were human. The stillness they possessed was that of apex predators, their focus absolute. The guard closed the door behind us, the heavy thud echoing with a grim finality. I was trapped. Idren led me toward the fire, into the center of their circle. The heat was a physical force, pressing against my skin. He did not release me, his hand remaining firmly at my back. A silent declaration to all who watched. "She knows," he said, his voice stripped of its courtly polish. It was deeper here, rougher, resonating with the authority of the Alpha. An old man with a face like a weathered map and long silver hair braided with leather cords leaned forward. His eyes were a pale, milky blue, yet they seemed to see more than any other. "She saw the change?" His voice was a dry rustle of autumn leaves. "The bond accelerated it. I could not contain it," Idren stated, a note of self-recrimination in his tone. A woman with a warrior's build and a face marred by a vicious scar that ran from her eyebrow to her lip let out a soft, contemptuous sound. Her scent was sharp, aggressive, like ozone before a lightning strike. "A human mate, fragile, it makes you weak, my prince." She spoke the title prince as if it were an insult. Idren's body went rigid beside me. A low growl, so deep it was more a vibration I felt through his hand than a sound I heard, rumbled in his chest. "Be careful, Brina. She is the princess, and she is my mate." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Brina's lip curled back from her teeth in a silent snarl, but she held her tongue, her gaze on me filled with undisguised loathing. This was his pack. Not counselors, not advisors, a pack. And their alpha had just brought a strange, weak creature into their midst. The old man, who I now assumed was the council's leader, spoke again. "Your name, child." My throat was dry. I swallowed, forcing the words out. "Gwenora of House Lisar." "Lisar," he mused, stroking a braid. "An old house, a human house. Your blood is strong, they say, but it is not the blood of the wolf. Why should we believe you are fit to stand beside the Alpha? To be Luna Queen?" Luna Queen. The title struck me with a fresh wave of panic. It was not a role I had ever imagined, a crown I had ever wanted. I had been raised to be a consort, a silent, beautiful symbol of an alliance. They were asking me to be a leader of monsters. My fear was a cold, hard knot in my stomach, but beneath it, a spark of defiance kindled. I had been lied to, bartered, and brought here to be judged by these creatures who looked at me as if I were nothing more than prey. I lifted my chin, meeting the old man's unnerving gaze. "I was not aware my fitness was a matter for debate," I said, my voice clearer and stronger than I expected. "My marriage to your prince was a treaty signed in blood and honor between two kingdoms. Or has the great house of Malric forgotten the meaning of its word?" A stunned silence fell over the chamber. Even Brina, the scarred warrior, looked taken aback. They had expected a frightened girl, a weeping lamb. They had not expected a princess who knew how to use her words as shields. A slow smile touched the old man's lips. "She has a spine, at least. I am Kael, elder of this pack. The one you insulted is Brina, our war master. And these," he gestured to the others, "are Rhys, Fen, and Lyra, the heart of the pack." My gaze flickered over them. Rhys was quiet, his eyes a piercing gold, watching me with a calm, analytical intensity. Fen and Lyra, a man and a woman who sat close together, looked younger, their energy more volatile, a restless power simmering just beneath their skin. "You saw the change," Kael continued, his smile fading. "You know our prince is not merely a man. He is the vessel of the first wolf's spirit. His power is immense, but it comes at a cost. The bond between an alpha and his mate is the anchor that keeps the man from being consumed by the beast. It is the most sacred, most powerful magic we know." "I don't understand," I whispered, my bravado evaporating. "The bond forged by your vows is incomplete," Kael explained, his voice taking on the cadence of a teacher. "It is a thread, not a chain. He feels your presence, your fear, your emotions. The wolf recognizes you as his. That is why you were not harmed. But you feel nothing from him, do you? Beyond the fear he inspires." I thought of the strange energy I'd felt from his touch, the unsettling hum of power. Was that it? A pale shadow of this bond he spoke of? Idrin spoke then, his voice a low growl of protection. "This is not the time, Kael. She is still in shock." "There is no other time," Brina snapped, surging to her feet. "The blood moon is in 3 nights. If the bond is not sealed by then, your control will shatter. The beast will be untethered. It could rampage, destroy villages, expose us all. This human weakness could be the end of everything we have protected for 1,000 years." The blood moon. I looked from Brina's furious face to Uagn, Idrin's grim one. "It is a time of immense power," Kael said softly. "A time when the veil between the man and the beast is at its thinnest. For the Alpha, it is the most dangerous night of the year. Only a fully sealed mate bond can ground him." A cold, creeping horror washed over me. This was about more than just their secrets. My life, their lives, the safety of the kingdom. It was all tied together in a knot of primal magic I couldn't begin to comprehend. "How?" I asked, the word a faint breath of sound. "How is the bond sealed?" Idrin placed his hand on my shoulder, his grip tightening, a silent message for me to be still, to let him handle this, but I shook my head, my eyes locked on Kael. I needed to know. I had been a pawn long enough. Kael's pale eyes met mine. There was no pity in them, only the cold, hard weight of reality. The bond is sealed in blood and choice. He cannot force it upon you. You must accept it. You must accept him, all of him. He rose from his chair and walked toward me, his movement slow and deliberate. He stopped before me and held out his gnarled hand. You must allow him to mark you, princess. Mark me? The mating bite, Brina snarled from across the fire. He will bite you, claim you. His magic will flow into you, changing you, binding you to him, to the pack. It will awaken the strength in your blood, or it will kill you. The world swam before my eyes, the heat from the fire, the thick, musky scent, the terrible weight of their stares. It was too much. Bite me, let this man, this beast, sink his fangs into my flesh. The idea was so barbaric, so monstrous, my mind recoiled from it. And if I refuse? I managed to ask, my voice trembling. Then the thread of the bond will sever, Kael said, his voice grave. He will be left untethered on the blood moon. And you will be an outsider, a stranger who knows our deepest secret. The pack does not suffer such threats to exist for long. It was not a choice. It was an ultimatum. Become one of them, or be eliminated. My gilded cage had shrunk to the size of a tomb. I looked at Idrin. His face was etched with torment that seemed to eclipse my own. The prince, the man, was at war with the Alpha, the beast. He was bound by his duty to his people, to his very nature. But the look in his eyes, that swirling vortex of gray and gold, was one of profound regret. He had not wanted this for me. He stepped between me and Kael, shielding me with his body. He was no longer the cold, distant prince, but a protective wall of muscle and heat. The scent of pine and wildness enveloped me, a strangely comforting blanket in the face of my terror. She will have her 3 days, Idrin declared, his voice a command that echoed off the stone walls, silencing all argument. The choice is hers alone. No one will touch her. No one will threaten her. She is under my protection until the moon rises. He turned to me, and for the first time, I felt the full, terrifying force of his will, of the Alpha, directed at me. But it was not a threat. It was a promise. His golden-flecked eyes held mine, and in their depths, I saw the beast, and I saw the man, and I saw the chains of fate that bound them both. The choice is yours, Gwenora, he murmured, his voice for my ears alone. Serve a human king in a life of comfortable lies, or stand with a wolf king and face the bloody truth. But choose you must. I did not remember the walk back to our chambers. My mind had retreated, leaving my body to follow Idrin's silent, imposing form on autopilot. The iron-strapped oak doors closed behind us, and the sound, which should have been a comfort, was the clang of a portcullis dropping. I was alone with him again, but the polite stranger was gone forever, replaced by the Alpha Prince, whose pack resided in the stone heart of this castle. He did not speak, simply moved to the hearth and stared into the flames, the firelight dancing across the harsh planes of his face and glinting off the gold in his eyes. The silence was a living thing, filled with the unspoken words from the chamber below. Luna Queen, mating bite, or it will kill you. I walked on unsteady legs to the window, the same window the wolf had leapt from, and looked out at the sprawling lands of Vorlog. The forests were a deep, menacing green, the mountains jagged teeth against a bruised purple sky. This was his kingdom, a kingdom of predators hiding in plain sight. For 2 days I was a ghost in my own life. I was treated with a new, unnerving deference. The ladies-in-waiting who had once chattered with me about silks and poetry now fell silent when I entered a room, their eyes wan and frightened before they scurried away. The castle guards, men I had barely noticed before, now watched my every move. They no longer saw a human princess. They saw the Alpha's intended. A piece of territory to be watched, to be protected, and perhaps to be judged. I felt their stares like a physical weight, the mark of the hunted branded on my very soul. Idrin kept his distance. He slept in a chair by the fire, a silent, brooding guardian. During the day, he attended to his duties, leaving me to the suffocating silence of our chambers. Yet I felt his presence even when he was gone. It was a low hum in the air, an awareness that prickled at the edges of my senses. Kael had said the bond was a thread. Now that I knew it was there, I could feel it. A taut, invisible line connecting me to him. I could almost sense his moods. A distant storm of frustration, a cold wave of exhaustion, a sudden sharp spike of anger that had nothing to do with me. It was an invasion, a violation of the sanctity of my own mind. On the morning of the second day, I decided I could not bear the confinement a moment longer. I would not be a frightened doe hiding in a thicket, waiting for the wolves to decide my fate. I dressed myself in a simple gown of dark green wool, brushed my own hair, and walked out of the chamber, my head held high. If I was to be judged, it would be on my own 2 feet. I sought refuge in the one place that had ever offered me peace here, the glass gardens. A sprawling conservatory of iron and glass built against the southern wall of the castle. It was a pocket of warmth and life in the cold stone fortress. I had spent hours there, reading among the fragrant blossoms and lush greenery, pretending I was anywhere else. But today the peace was gone. The humid air felt close and cloying, the scent of the exotic flowers too sweet, almost sickening. The rustle of leaves sounded like whispers. I knew I was not alone. I found her by a fountain of black marble, sharpening a wicked-looking dagger on a whetstone. Brina, the War Master. She didn't look up as I approached, the rhythmic schlick, schlick of steel on stone the only sound. She wore black leather breeches and a tunic, her powerful muscles moving with efficient grace. The scar on her face seemed to writhe in the dappled sunlight. "The little bird has left its cage," she said without preamble, her voice a low, dangerous purr. She still didn't look at me. "Or were you trying to fly away?" "I am the princess of this castle," I said, my voice tight. "I go where I please." Brina laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "You are a trinket from the south, nothing more, a porcelain doll brought here to soothe a beast you cannot possibly comprehend. You think your title means anything to us? To the pack? We have only one law, the strength of the alpha, and you are making him weak." She finally looked up, and the raw animosity in her gaze was a physical blow. Her eyes were a pale, predatory gray. The eyes of a wolf even in her human form. "You don't know him," I countered, though the words felt hollow. Did I know him? I have run with him since we were pups. I have fought at his side, bled for him, watched him tear our enemies apart. I know the fire that burns in his blood, and I know what happens when it burns without an anchor. She stood, her movements fluid and menacing, the dagger now held loosely in her hand. She was taller than I was, broader, radiating an aura of violence that made the air crackle. He carries the spirit of the first wolf. It is a god of hunger and rage. For years he has fought it, controlled it. But the bond with you, it's like a crack in a dam. All that power needs to go somewhere. It needs a strong vessel to receive it. It needs a Luna who can bear his mark and rise to meet his power, not a fragile human who will shatter at his first touch. She took a step closer. The scent of ozone and aggression rolled off her. He looks at you, and the man in him feels pity, protection, but the wolf just sees a mate, a thing to be claimed. On the night of the blood moon, there will be no prince. There will be no pity. There will only be the beast. And when it comes for you, and your weakness makes you scream and fight, your rejection will shatter his control completely. And when he slaughters you, your blood on his muzzle will be the thing that finally drives him mad forever. Her words were poisoned darts, each one finding its mark in my deepest fears. A cold terror, sharper and more immediate than anything I had felt before, seized me. "He would not," I whispered. "He wouldn't want to," she corrected, a cruel smile touching her lips. She took another step, cornering me against the cold marble of the fountain. "But the beast will. It will claim you or it will destroy you. There is no other path. So tell me, princess, what will you do? Will you accept the bite, or will you doom us all with your cowardice?" She raised the hand holding the dagger, and for a heart-stopping moment, I thought she would strike me. Instead, she touched the flat of the cold blade to my throat, right over the pulse that hammered there in frantic terror. "The mark is made here," she hissed, her face inches from mine. "Can you imagine it? His teeth breaking the skin, the power that floods you. It would burn a lesser woman to ash, and you are the least of us." "Enough." The word was not spoken, it was a physical force, a wave of pure power that slammed into the conservatory. The air grew heavy, charged with an immense pressure that made my ears pop. Idran stood at the entrance, half hidden by the broad leaves of a tropical plant, but his presence filled the entire space. His face was a thunderhead of controlled fury, but it was his eyes that held the true storm. The gold had all but consumed the gray, and they burned with a terrifying, incandescent light. He was not the prince, and he was not the wolf. He was something in between, something far more dangerous. Brina froze, the dagger still pressed to my throat. The color drained from her face. Fear, stark and absolute, flashed in her eyes. She had challenged the alpha's mate, a transgression of the highest order. Idran moved. He didn't walk, he flowed, covering the distance between us in a few silent, predatory strides. He did not look at me. His entire focus, the full, crushing weight of his alpha power, was directed at Brina. "You will remove your blade from my mate," he commanded, his voice a low, guttural growl that vibrated in my bones. Brina snatched her hand back as if she'd been burned, the dagger clattering to the stone floor. She dropped to one knee, her head bowed in submission. "Alpha," she choked out. "You forget your place, War Master," Idran continued, his voice lethally soft. He circled her like a wolf stalking its prey. "She is not yours to test. She is not yours to threaten. She is mine. To touch her without my leave is to challenge me. Do you challenge me, Brina?" "No, Alpha, never," she whispered to the floor, her powerful body trembling. "Look at me," he commanded. Slowly, she raised her head. The fear in her eyes was profound. He had stripped her of her pride, her aggression, with nothing but his presence. I watched, mesmerized and horrified at this raw display of dominance. This was the power of the Wolf King. "She is to be your Luna Queen," he snarled. "You will show her the respect that title demands, or I will strip you of your rank and your place in this pack. Am I understood?" "Yes, Alpha." "Then go before I forget that you have bled for me." Brina scrambled to her feet and fled without a backward glance, leaving the dagger behind on the floor. The oppressive weight in the air lessened as she disappeared, but the tension remained, coiled and shivering between Idran and me. He stood over the fallen dagger for a long moment, his chest rising and falling with deep, controlled breaths. The gold in his eyes slowly receded, leaving the familiar stormy gray, though they were now turbulent with emotion. He finally turned to me. He reached out, his hand hesitating for a moment before his fingers gently, so gently, brushed against the skin of my throat where the blade had been. His touch was warm, sending a jolt of shocking electricity through me. It wasn't the cold, obligatory touch of the prince. It was the touch of a man who had just shown me the monster he held at bay. "Are you harmed?" he asked, his voice raw. I shook my head, unable to speak. My throat felt thick with unshed tears, not of fear, but of a confusing, overwhelming flood of emotion. I had seen his power. I had seen the beast look out from his eyes, and it had been unleashed not to threaten me, but to protect me. He let his hand drop, the loss of contact leaving my skin feeling cold. He looked from my face to the deep, untamed woods visible through the glass walls, a profound weariness settling over his features. "She is right about one thing, Gwenra," he said quietly, his gaze lost in the distance. "The blood moon is tomorrow night, the beast that I become. It will not be the prince you know. It will not be capable of reason or mercy. It will be a creature of pure instinct. He turned back to me, and his eyes, now more gray than gold, were filled with a desperate, pleading vulnerability that broke my heart. It will see you, and it will claim what is its. My control will be a whisper in a hurricane. Your choice, your only choice, is whether you will be the anchor that can calm the storm, or the ship it breaks upon the rocks. The rest of the day passed in a blur of heightened senses. The encounter in the glass gardens had stripped away the last vestiges of my disbelief. The threat was no longer an abstract concept, a barbaric tale whispered in a stone chamber. It was real. It had a name, Brina. It had a deadline, the blood moon. And it had a face, the face of the man who now sat across from me in the heavy silence of our chambers. The setting sun casting long, blood-red shadows across the room. He had not left my side since the incident. He had ordered a meal to be brought to our rooms, a simple affair of bread, cheese, and roasted meat that I could not bring myself to touch. The knot of fear in my stomach had twisted into a cold, hard certainty. A choice had to be made. "Tell me about it," I said, my voice cutting through the stillness. It was the first time I had initiated a conversation since the night of the change. Idrin looked up from the knife he had been turning over and over in his hands. He raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "Everything. The first wolf, this birthright. Brina said you carry its spirit. I don't understand." He set the knife down with a soft click and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. The firelight carved deep shadows under his cheekbones, making him look weary and ancient. "It is not a story for human ears." "I am to be your Luna Queen," I countered, using the title Kale had given me. The words felt strange and heavy on my tongue. "Or I am to be your victim. I think that earns me the right to a story." A flicker of something, admiration perhaps, crossed his face. He let out a long, slow breath. "Very well, the Melrick line did not conquer this land. We are of this land." Millennia ago, before castles and kings, a great spirit wolf roamed these mountains. It was the embodiment of the North, wild, powerful, and beholden to none. The first men who came here tried to hunt it, to tame the land. They failed. They were prey. His voice was low, hypnotic, the cadence of a story told 1,000 times around a clan fire. Then came the first Malric. He did not come with a spear, but with respect. He understood that the spirit could not be conquered, only joined. He performed a ritual on a night of a blood moon. He offered his own blood, his own heart, and his own will to the spirit. He asked not for mastery, but for union. The spirit accepted. It merged with his bloodline, a river of magic flowing into a human vessel. He became the first Wolf King. "So it is not a curse," I breathed, the pieces falling into place. "No, it is a covenant. In exchange for a human form, a mind to reason, and a heart to feel, the spirit offers its strength, its senses, its connection to the wild. The Maelric kings have used that power to protect this kingdom for 1,000 years. But the spirit is not a tame thing, Gwenra. It is primal. It remembers being the apex predator, the god of this mountain. And with every generation, its voice grows stronger in the blood. My father, he struggled to contain it. He ruled with a fist of iron because he was terrified of the power raging inside him. He looked into the fire, his gaze distant, haunted. The alpha spirit demands a mate, an anchor, a Luna, a queen to rule the wild heart of its kingdom. Without one, its power is untethered, destructive. It seeks balance. My father's mate, my mother, her blood was weak. The marking broke her mind. She lived out her days in a padded room, seeing monsters in every shadow. The spirit's power, unbalanced, eventually consumed my father from within. A profound, chilling sorrow washed over me. This was the legacy he carried. Not just a crown, but a raging god in his veins and in the memory of a family destroyed by it. His coldness, his distance. It was not a lack of feeling. It was a shield. A cage he had built around himself to protect others from the fire within. "And you?" I asked softly. Why did you wait so long to find a mate? He finally met my eyes, and the pain in them was so raw it stole my breath. Because I feared I would repeat his tragedy, I tried to master the spirit through will alone. I became a prince of ice, locking my emotions away, believing I could starve the beast. But it only grew hungrier. The pack grew restless. The kingdom needed a strong alpha, not a cold king. The elders, Kael, they found you. Your lineage is ancient, stronger than my mother's. They believed you could withstand the bond. I saw you, and for the first time, the howling in my blood went quiet. I allowed myself to hope. He gave a short, bitter laugh. It seems I have only brought you to the same precipice. We sat in the flickering firelight, the truth a raw, open wound between us. He was not a monster. He was a man fighting a god within himself, a man bound by a terrible, magnificent destiny. He had lied to me, yes, but he had done it to protect me, to give me a choice he himself had never had. Brina said the bond would change me, I said, my voice barely a whisper. It will. My magic, the spirit's magic, will flow into you. It will awaken things in your own blood that you never knew existed. Your senses will sharpen. You will feel the pack, the land, as if they were extensions of your own body. You will be stronger, faster, more alive than you have ever been. He paused, his expression becoming deadly serious. But the price is high. You will be bound to me, to my life, to my fate. You will feel my pain, my rage. The wolf will always be a part of you, a whisper in your heart. You will never again be just Gwenora of House Lysar. You will be part of something older and wilder than any human kingdom. I rose and walked to him, my feet moving of their own accord. I knelt before his chair so we were at eye level. I could smell the faint scent of pine that always clung to him, see the exhaustion etched in the lines around his eyes. He watched my every move, his body tense, uncertain. I reached out and laid my hand on his jaw, where the scratch from the change had been. It was nearly healed now, only a thin pink line remaining. His skin was warm, his stubble rough against my palm. He flinched at my touch, a barely perceptible tremor, as if he were unused to any tenderness. I did not pull away. What if it kills me? I asked, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering. What if my blood is not strong enough? He covered my hand with his own, his large, calloused palm engulfing my fingers. His touch was electric, a current of warmth and that strange humming power flowing into me. It will not, he said, his voice a low, fierce vow. The wolf chose you. The spirit in my blood recognized you as its mate. It will not destroy what it has chosen. He squeezed my hand gently. The danger is not in the bite, Gwenora. The danger is in the fear. If you fight it, if your heart rejects the bond as it is being forged, then the magic will have nowhere to go. It will tear you apart. I looked deep into his eyes, into that swirling storm of gray and gold. I saw the prince, noble and burdened. I saw the alpha, powerful and protective. And for the first time, I saw the man, Idran, who was trapped between them both, desperate and alone. In that moment, the choice became terrifyingly clear. I could run, I could refuse and hope the pack's justice was swift. That would be an end to fear. Or I could stay. I could take this impossible leap of faith into a world of magic and blood and fangs. I could bind myself to this magnificent, tormented man and face the monster at his side. It was a choice between a swift death and a life I could not possibly imagine. A life of fear, yes, but also of a power and a passion my old world could never offer. My life as a princess, a political pawn, had been a gilded cage, beautiful and empty. Brina had called me a porcelain doll. Perhaps she was right, but even dolls could choose to stand up. Even caged birds could choose to fly, even if the flight was into the heart of a storm. The night of the change, I began, my voice trembling slightly as I recalled the memory. When you were the wolf, you came to me. You could have killed me, but you didn't. You touched my hand. He nodded, his gaze intense. I remember. It was like a dream. I was raging, lost in agony and power. And then there was your scent. A beacon, a quiet harbor. I knew, the wolf knew, that you were home. Home. The word resonated in the deepest part of my soul. I had never had a home. I had my father's castle, and now my husband's, but I had never belonged anywhere. A strange calm settled over me. The fear was still there, a cold stone in my gut, but it was no longer in control. I had been born into a world of duty and obligation. For the first time in my life, I was being given a choice that was truly my own, a choice that would define not just my future, but the very essence of who I was. The blood moon rises tonight, I said, my gaze unwavering. Yes, he confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. I leaned forward, closing the small distance between us. The scent of him, fine in power and man, filled my senses. I pressed my lips to the thin scar on his jaw. A soft, deliberate kiss. He went utterly still, his breath catching in his throat. It was the first time I had ever touched him with intent, with anything other than marital duty. When I pulled back, I looked him square in the eye, and the woman who spoke was not the frightened girl who had cowered by the bedpost. It was someone new, someone who had looked into the abyss and was not yet ready to fall. Show me where I must be, I said, when it begins. He led me not down into the mountain's heart, but up. We climbed a winding turret stairwell I had never seen, the stone steps worn smooth by centuries of Melrick feet. The air grew colder, thinner, tasting of ozone and the coming night. There were no torches here. The only light came from narrow arrow slits that showed glimpses of a sky deepening from indigo to a bruised, bloody violet. Idrin walked ahead of me, his broad shoulders a dark silhouette, the silence between us heavy with unspoken gravity. He carried a single unlit torch in his hand. My own hand rested on the cold stone wall for balance, my heart beat a frantic drum against the ancient quiet. We emerged onto the castle's highest battlement. The wind was a physical force this high up, a wild, shrieking thing that tore at my hair and whipped my woolen cloak around me. It smelled of ice and pine and the vast, empty loneliness of the sky. The world was spread out below us, a dark tapestry of forest and mountain, under a canopy of stars that seemed close enough to touch, but they were all dimmed by the celestial spectacle that was beginning to unfold. The moon was rising. It was huge, swollen, and stained a terrifying, beautiful shade of arterial red. It was not the gentle silver light of my wedding night. This was a wounded, bleeding moon, and it painted the stone beneath our feet in gruesome crimson light. This was the blood moon, a moon for gods and monsters. The battlement was a wide circular platform of stone, empty save for a single iron ring set into its center. A thick, rusted chain coiled beside it. My blood ran cold. This was where he meant to be chained. This is the altar of the moon, Idrun said, his voice nearly lost in the wind's howl. The place of the first covenant. Every May Elric Alpha has faced the blood moon here. He walked to the center of the platform and dropped the torch. He turned to me, his face a stark, pale mask in the bloody moonlight. The gold in his eyes was already beginning to burn, a fierce, feral light that seemed to mirror the color of the moon. When the change is complete, he began. His voice strained, every word a battle against the power rising in him. The beast will see the chain. It will see it as a challenge. It will fight it. That is when it will be most enraged, most dangerous. He took a step towards me, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. A tremor ran through him, the first sign of the agonizing transformation to come. You must not be near me then. Stay by the stairwell. Do not approach until the rage passes, until it sees you, and when it does, his breath hitched, a pained, guttural sound. Gwenora, you must show no fear, none. It will smell it. It will interpret it as a rejection, a challenge. It will see you not as a mate to be claimed, but as prey to be broken. How? I whispered, my voice a thin thread of sound. How can I not be afraid? He reached out and gripped my shoulders, his hold desperate, intense. The heat from his hands burned through the layers of my cloak and gown. You must remember what I told you. Remember the man. Remember that beneath the rage and the fangs, it is me. And I would rather die than harm you. Trust that. Trust me, it is the only shield you will have. He pulled me closer, and for the first time, his mouth crashed down on mine. It was not a kiss of tenderness or passion. It was a kiss of raw desperation, of farewell. It was fierce and possessive, a branding, a final human plea before he was consumed by the god in his blood. His lips were hard, demanding, and I tasted the salt of his sweat and the metallic tang of his fear. It was over as quickly as it began. He pushed me gently but firmly away from him, towards the relative safety of the stairwell. Go now, he rasped, his voice already changing, growing deeper, rougher. And whatever happens, do not run. I stumbled back, my heart seizing with a terror so profound it was paralyzing. He turned his back on me and knelt by the iron ring. He picked up one end of the heavy chain and, with movements that were becoming stiff and jerky, began to wrap it around his own waist. Another tremor racked his body, more violent this time. A low growl tore from his throat, a sound of pure agony. I could not look away. This was my choice. I had to bear witness. The change was faster this time, more violent. There was no slow tearing of fabric, only an explosive shredding as his body began to swell and contort. The cracking of his bones was a volley of gunshots in the shrieking wind. He threw his head back and howled, but it was not the mournful cry I had heard before. It was a roar of defiance, a challenge to the bloody moon hanging above him, a declaration of war against the spirit that was claiming his flesh. Fur, black as pitch, erupted from his skin. Claws burst from his fingertips, gouging deep into the stone as he fought to control the agonizing transformation. His human form was erased in a wave of primal power, a grotesque and sacred metamorphosis under the crimson light. And then the wolf stood there. It was larger than I remembered. Its muscles coiled like thick hawsers under its dark pelt. The blood moon's light caught in its fur, giving it a hellish red sheen. It was bound to the center of the altar by the heavy iron chain, a titan tethered to the world of men. And its eyes were not gold. They were two burning pools of molten crimson, mirroring the moon, filled with an ancient, untamable rage. This was not the wolf that had nudged my hand. This was the first wolf. This was the god. It saw the chain. With a roar that shook the very stones beneath my feet, it lunged against its bonds. The chain snapped taut, the links groaning with a sound of tortured metal. The beast was thrown back, but it came again, and again, a hurricane of fury and claws and fangs, tearing at the iron links, its roars of frustration echoing across the mountain tops. The sheer, unrestrained violence of it was breathtaking. Brina had been right. There was no man here. There was only the beast, and it wanted only to kill. I was flattened against the stone arch of the stairwell, my hand pressed over my mouth to stifle my screams. My body screamed at me to flee, to run down the stairs and hide in the deepest, darkest dungeon of the castle. Do not run, his voice echoed in my head. Show no fear. How could I not? This creature was rage incarnate. This was a walking death. The beast finally seemed to realize its efforts were futile. It ceased its struggles against the chain, its massive chest heaving, steam pluming from its bared fangs. It stood panting, its head low, the crimson eyes scanning the perimeter of its prison. And then they found me. The world stopped. The wind died. The only sound was the frantic, panicked drumming of my own blood in my ears. The beast's head came up, its focus absolute, its lips peeled back in a silent snarl, revealing teeth like daggers. The scent of my terror must have been a stench in the air, a beacon calling to the predator. It took a slow, deliberate step towards me, the chain pulling taut, a low, menacing growl rumbling deep in its chest. This was it, the moment of truth. Anchor or ship, Life or death. I closed my eyes. I could not watch it stalk me. Remember the man. I saw his face in my mind, his eyes swirling with gray and gold, filled with torment and a desperate hope. Trust me. I pictured his hand covering mine, the warmth, the strength. You are home. The words were a lifeline in a sea of terror. I clung to them. I was not Gwenora, the pawn. I was Gwenora, his mate. I was the one he had chosen, the one the wolf had recognized. I was his anchor. I had to be. I opened my eyes. The wolf was at the very end of its chain, only a few yards from me now. It was crouched low, its muscles tense to spring. The growl was louder now, a promise of violence. Taking a breath that felt like swallowing fire, I pushed myself away from the wall. I took one step forward, onto the bloodlit stone of the altar. The wolf froze. Its growl faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of confusion in its crimson eyes. It had expected the prey to cower or flee. It had not expected it to advance, show no fear. I forced my legs to move, one step, then another. I walked slowly, deliberately, into the circle of its rage. I did not raise my hands. I did not avert my gaze. I kept my eyes locked on its, trying to project a calm I was a universe away from feeling. I was walking into the jaws of death, and every primal instinct screamed at me to stop. I stopped just out of its reach. We stood there, facing each other, the she-wolf and the god, the human and the beast. "Idran," I whispered, the wind stealing the name from my lips, but I knew it heard. Its sharp ears twitched. A low whine escaped its throat, a sound of profound confusion. The rage was still there, a simmering volcano in its eyes, but it was now warring with something else. Recognition. I took the final step. I was now within its reach. It could lunge, and I would be dead before I could even scream. It did not lunge. It remained frozen, its massive form trembling with the force of the warring instincts inside it. Slowly praying to every god I knew and the one I faced, I sank to my knees. I lowered my head, baring the back of my neck. It was an act of ultimate submission, an act of ultimate trust. I was offering myself. I was giving it the choice, claim me or kill me. For an eternity there was nothing, only the howl of the wind and the thunder of my own heart. I waited for the crushing weight of its jaws, for the searing pain of its fangs. Instead, I felt a puff of hot, musky breath against my skin. I felt the delicate, hesitant touch of a wet nose against my hair. A low sound rumbled in its chest, but it was no longer a growl of rage. It was a deep, guttural purr of possession, of acceptance. It nudged my shoulder, a gentle but firm pressure, pushing me to turn my head. I did slowly, my eyes still downcast. It nudged me again, more insistently. I knew what it wanted. With a trembling hand, I pulled aside the thick collar of my gown and my woolen cloak. I tilted my head, exposing the pale, vulnerable skin of my neck and shoulder to the cold night air and to the beast. I felt its breath, hot and heavy, against my throat. I could smell the blood and wildness on it. This was it. I held my breath, my body rigid, waiting for the bite. It would either be the searing pain of death or the burning fire of a new life. Its teeth, sharp and terrifying, grazed my skin. A jolt, half pleasure, half fear, shot through me. It licked the spot, a rough, warm tongue tasting me, testing me. Then with a final possessive growl that was part man, part beast, and part god, it bit down. Fire. My first sensation was fire. Not the destructive heat of a flame, but a liquid golden fire that erupted from the point of the bite and flooded every inch of my body. It was an agony so pure, so absolute, it transcended pain and became something else entirely. It was a holy conflagration, burning away the woman I had been. It incinerated the fear, the doubt, the lonely girl in the gilded cage. It swept through my veins, rewriting my very essence, reforging me in the crucible of its primal magic. I did not scream. The fire consumed my voice. turning it to ash. My consciousness shattered into a million incandescent shards. And in that moment of dissolution, I felt him. Not just the physical weight of the wolf above me, but Idrun. His soul, his power, the ancient spirit of the first wolf. It all poured into me, a tidal wave of sensation and memory. I felt his loneliness, a vast, frozen expanse he had inhabited his entire life. I felt the crushing weight of his duty, the constant howling battle for control. I felt his terror, not for himself, but for me. And beneath it all, I felt a love so fierce, so possessive, so utterly absolute, it was a force of nature in itself. It was the love of a king for his kingdom, of a wolf for its mate, of a god for its single, chosen worshipper. And I felt the pack. The bond, once a thin, tentative thread, became a brilliant network of light, connecting me to them all. I felt Kyl's ancient wisdom, a deep, slow-moving river. I felt Brina's fierce, grudging loyalty, a fire banked but not extinguished. I felt the restless energy of the others, their surprise, their awe, their acceptance. I was no longer an outsider. The mark had made me one of them. I was Luna. The world rushed back in, a kaleidoscope of senses so sharp and vivid they were overwhelming. The wind no longer just chilled my skin. I could feel its currents, taste the scent of pine and distant snow it carried. The stone beneath my knees was not just cold and hard. I could feel the age of it, the deep, slow heartbeat of the mountain itself. And I could hear everything, the scuttling of a mouse in the castle walls 100 feet below, the steady, powerful beat of Idrun's heart. I opened my eyes. The wolf was still above me, its fangs still embedded in my shoulder, but the pressure was gentle now. Its eyes were no longer crimson with rage. They were a pure, molten gold, and they gazed down at me with an intelligence and a tenderness that made my own heart ache. It was him, all of him, man and beast, prince and god, fused into one by the magic of our sealed bond. Slowly he released me. He licked the wound on my shoulder, his rough tongue a soothing balm against the burning ache. The bleeding had already stopped. He looked at me, a long, searching gaze, and then threw his head back and howled. It was a sound I will never forget. It was not a cry of pain or defiance, but a song of pure, triumphant joy. It was a declaration to the bloody moon, to the mountains, to the stars, and to the pack, waiting in the heart of the mountain below. It was the sound of a king who had finally found his queen. From the depths of the castle, an answering chorus of howls rose to meet his, a symphony of wild voices acknowledging their new Luna. My pack! I awoke in our bed, the morning sun warm on my face. For a moment I was disoriented, the events on the battlement feeling like a fever dream. Then I felt the dull, throbbing ache in my shoulder. I pushed aside the silk of my nightgown and looked. There, on the pale skin of my shoulder and neck, was the mark. It was not a ragged wound, but a beautiful, intricate pattern of silvery scar tissue, like a swirl of frost on a winter window pane. It seemed to shimmer with a faint, inner light, a permanent testament to the vow I had made. It was a brand of ownership, yes, but it was also a crown. I felt a presence and turned my head. Idrun was sitting in the chair by the fire, watching me. He was human again, dressed in a simple tunic, but he was not the same man. The icy mask was gone, shattered forever. The cold, distant prince had been banished, replaced by a king who wore his power not as a burden, but as a mantle. His eyes, a perfect balanced swirl of gray and gold, held a warmth I had never seen before. "Gwenora," he said, his voice husky. I sat up, a wave of dizziness washing over me as my newly heightened senses adjusted to the world. The sunlight was brighter, the scent of the wood smoke from the hearth richer. I could feel him, a steady, comforting presence at the edge of my mind. A warm glow that mirrored the mark on my shoulder. He crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. He reached out, his fingers tracing the edge of the silvery mark, his touch sending a shiver of pleasure through me. "I remember everything," he said, his voice thick with wonder and remorse. "The rage, the fear in your eyes, Gwenora, what you did, The trust you showed me." He couldn't finish, his throat tight with emotion. I placed my hand over his. "You told me to trust you, so I did." He looked at me, and his eyes were filled with a love so profound it made the courtly poems I'd once read seem like children's rhymes. He leaned in and kissed me, and this time there was no desperation, no farewell. It was a kiss of beginning, a joining of two souls who had found their other half in the heart of a storm. It was gentle and deep and full of promises that needed no words. When he pulled away, he rested his forehead against mine. I thought I was wedding a human princess to seal an alliance. I smiled, a true, genuine smile that reached my eyes. I could feel the strength humming in my blood, a wild, joyful energy that longed for the forest and the hunt. I was no longer a fragile doll. I was something more. "And I thought I was marrying a cold, distant prince," I murmured, my fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "But it seems we both discovered our fate belongs to the wolves." He closed his eyes, a contented sigh escaping him. For the first time since I had met him, the great Alpha, the wolf king of Vorlog, looked completely and utterly at peace. He was no longer alone in his wild kingdom. He had his Luna, and as the sun streamed into our chamber, I knew, with a certainty that resonated in the very marrow of my bones, that I was finally, truly home.